If you're just curious about what soloing Metaphor Refantazio looks like, here you go. What the How many turns is that? That 9? Did he just summon Vishnu? Oh, hell no. Dude, when is it gonna be my turn?
It hurts me, kill me. What? It burns.
Alright, well, it's my turn again, finally, and I think all we can do is heal. That's really the only option we have. Let's see what he does next. That doesn't look good. Okay. Alright. Before jumping into anything, I won't be covering the story at all this run, so no major spoilers in this video, no plot points or anything like that. There are some things I'll be spoiled, like the bosses and some of the party members you can get in this game, along with dungeons, just because of the nature of this video. But if you're good with that, sit back, relax, and enjoy my hardest run on the channel yet. A solo run of Metaphor Refantazio on the highest difficulty. If you take a look at my channel, you'll see quite a few challenge runs of the Persona games, but you won't see a single solo run. It's because I'm kind of over it. I remember watching your bud Tevin do a solo Arsene run only 4 years ago, and it was just perfect. It was a cool video, an amazing idea, and honestly, there's tons of other great solo runs out there. I know Tevin wasn't the first to do this run. People have been doing solo runs in Persona games long before him. He's just who I used to watch. But since then, I feel like every channel that does Persona challenge runs has done at least one solo run, if not a few. I've done a few myself, just not on the channel. I'm tired of doing it, and I'm tired of watching it. But Metaphor Refantazio just dropped, and they changed the combat so much from their typical formula that for the first time in a long time, I'm excited to go for a solo run. The difficulty is quite different too from Persona games. The most devious change they've made is the press turn system. On hard difficulty, every enemy in the game gets an additional turn. Yes, you heard that correctly. Every single enemy in this game gets an additional turn on top of the other stuff that comes with the higher difficulty. Like the enemy's defense is being increased while the player's damage and defense is decreased. Most of the time, the enemy already has a ton of turns to begin with anyways. The tables really have turn. The protagonist in this game is not summoning God. Instead, you're fighting them. And in this game, you're not jumping enemies like you're used to. No, you are the one getting jumped this time around. This solo run will be completely different than what I'm accustomed to, and that's a good thing. So join me as we try something new and try to answer the question, can you solo Metaphor Refantazio? First things first, I'm doing this blind. I know a bit about Metaphor, but I don't know what specific fights are coming up or the mechanics behind them. So we're going to be learning as we go along. Secondly, and most importantly, the answer to our question is no. You can't solo Metaphor Refantazio. Thanks for watching. I play strategy and RPG games on the channel. I'm just kidding, kinda. I'm kidding about the video being over, not about soloing the game. You seriously can't solo this game. Well, at least not the whole game. The first reason is the prologue. You can't control your party members until they awaken to their Persona archetype. Excuse me, until they awaken to their archetype. This is normally not a problem, but they fight alongside you and are controlled by the AI. So they attack and stuff. This tarnishes the run, making a true solo run of the vanilla game impossible for now. Also, when you get full control of your party, you can't remove them from your party until 8:13, which for me was about 40 hours in. This honestly might be less than 40 hours in for you if you're doing a regular playthrough, but yeah, there's no way to take them out of the party until then. You can swap them out for other party members, but you can't remove them completely. When they die in combat, they go down but are resurrected before your next fight, so they are always there. In solo Persona runs, this happens sometimes for certain parts of the run. The community kind of all agrees you just have your party members guard until they're dead if they're forced into a battle. But you'll only do this every once in a while, not every single encounter you have in the game. At first, I really hated that they forced you to have a full party. I thought it was kind of annoying and felt like Atlas was forcing me to play with training wheels, but after really diving into the combat, I understand why they made the choice. It's because the game is almost unplayable early on with just one party member because of how the turn system works and because you're very limited in the amount of archetypes you can use. I'll go more in depth later for those of you who haven't played Metaphor yet, but to be brief, the system isn't like Persona where if you hit a weakness you can get like 6 turns if there's enough enemies. The most turns you can get is 2, regardless of how many enemies there are, and that's if you hit a weakness or a crit. Otherwise, you will always get 1 turn. This could be changed by some passives, but for a while, 1 to 2 turns is all you're getting. So how are we doing this then? First off, we're doing this on the highest difficulty available to us, which is hard, and we're going to put in place one rule for this run. The protagonist, who I've named Kirito, is the only one who can act in the party. Only Kirito can initiate attacks, use items, and activate their archetype. The other members can't. Also, no synthesis. These are powerful attacks they can do by combining with other party members. This wouldn't be much of a solo run if you were giving everyone the SES special, now would it? In Persona solo runs, we usually have the other party members guard, since it's the only way to pass your turn without taking an action. But Metaphor has added the ability for party members to pass, which essentially skips their turn as well. I should note this is not the same thing as a baton pass, where you can select the party member it goes to. All it does is skip you and start the next party member's turn. So when a party member's turn comes around, we'll be able to pass their turn or guard. You can also change your character's positioning in Metaphor. This doesn't count as an action in Metaphor and can be done outside of or inside of battle, so we're allowing it to for the run. The pass and guard seem like they do the exact same thing, but I get a bit creative later on in the way I use it, as well as the formations. So I think it'll add some fun depth to the run, as well as hopefully be a little unique from all the other Metaphor solo runs that will inevitably drop. As soon as we have the ability to remove party members, we will. There are still some story sections after 8.13 that will require you to bring party members along. The rules will be the same for these sections. We just won't be able to use the party members. We start off by naming ourselves after the greatest solo player known to man, and have our first major fight of the run, a human. There's not much to tell about the fight except that we awaken to our archetype and get introduced to the mechanics around the turn system. You get turns based on the number of party members you have. So since it's just me right now, there's one turn icon. If I land a critical hit or hit a weakness, we don't get one more as you may be used to in Persona. Instead, we consume half a turn. The turn goes over to the next person in the party. It's just us though, so we get to act a second time. If we hit a weakness again, it doesn't make a difference, our turn will still end. I believe this is why Alice didn't make it possible to play alone early on, since it makes defeating big groups of enemies virtually impossible. What makes solo runs possible in Persona games is the one more system, allowing you to have as many turns as you need, even if you're on your own, and because of the fusion system, which allows for pretty much infinite creativity. We go through some tutorials and don't really have anything noteworthy happen until Stroll awakens to his archetype. This means he'll stop attacking on his own from here on out, and Grease awakens to his right after. Now we can force both party members to do nothing and the run officially starts. We go through the Nord mines and get absolutely destroyed. We die about 14 times here, give or take. The area wasn't particularly hard, I just had no idea what I was doing. The area has these gelatin guys that are resistant to physical attacks, but I didn't have many options for magic. The tutorial said you can change your archetype at any time around the world, and I could not figure it out for the life of me. So I thought I was locked out of switching archetypes for now. So I just suffered through it and tried to brute force my way through the area. As you can see by the many deaths, that didn't work out. Eventually, I realized you can switch your archetype at the equipment screen. I was genuinely confused. I thought it would be in the party screen, maybe a tab called the archetype. Anyways, we switched to the mage, but I was already super low on resources, so I kept dying even more. I was just about losing my mind because I was getting cooked so early in the run. I started to just mess around to try and get a deeper understanding of the mechanics. So we spent maybe an hour here just messing around, dying, and trying new things. I want to have a solid grasp of how the combat works before the first real dungeon. After we messed around a ton, we started to make our way out of the dungeon, but we're still low on HP and MP from all the messing around. There's no way to reset your health and MP in this area. There is a merchant, but I really don't want to spend my gold here. So we just try to avoid all the enemies and pray that the leveling we did is enough in case there's a boss at the end. Easier said than done though. I'm pretty bad and I kept getting caught off guard in the overworld combat. If an enemy initiated an attack and ambushed me, it was always an instant team wipe, and this happened a lot. Eventually we do make it to the end of the mines and we have a human to fight. They give us the work for about 10 fights, I'm not gonna lie. We do gather some really valuable information from these attempts, like its weaknesses and mechanics, so we stock up on potions and go back for the final fight. I'll explain formations here since this was crucial to winning the fight. You can have party members be in the back or front of your formation. In the front you can do more melee damage. In the back you do less melee damage, but you take less damage. The back row doesn't affect your magic damage though. So ideally you want to be in the back row for using magic and be in the front row if you're a melee attacker. Our party members are always in the back row regardless of what class we give them. This is because we want them staying up as long as they can and they'll never be attacking anyways. So there's zero benefit to having them in the front row. When I was messing around earlier, I did experiment to see if party members in the front take more aggro. The attacks seem to always be random regardless of where they were in the formation. But don't quote me on that. I didn't test it out long enough to be entirely sure if it's true. The human is weak to ice, so everyone sits in the back, we spam ice at them and heal when we're low until we defeat them. After the boss, we run into a dragon and have the option to go around it, and I choose not to because I think I'm tough, and they showed me that I'm not. We go through some more story until we get to the first part of the Regal Cathedral. This section has a lot of skeletons that are weak to blunt damage. So we just use our regular attacks from our staff as a mage to carry us through those fights. At the end of this section, we run into our first problem, Undead Grease. This is still sort of part of the tutorial. You're meant to use synthesis skills to defeat him. These are attacks you can combo with your party members that do massive amounts of damage, but use your turn and your party members' turns. Even though it's very powerful and can be used on the protagonist's turn, it feels wrong to use it in a solo run. So we're banning it. This fight was absolute hell, and it's my experience that these pseudo-tutorial type fights, where you're meant to beat it with a certain mechanic, are the worst in challenge runs. Since the game is balanced in a way that you have to do what they want you to do to be able to move forward. We attempt this fight far too many times, so we try to brainstorm something new. We need to find a way to squeeze as much value as we can from our party members. All we can do right now is change archetypes, so we go Warrior for survivability. Warrior also has a passive that lets you do 10% more damage if we have another Warrior in the party, which we do, Stroll. So just by Stroll existing, he helps us do 10% more damage. During the fight, I also learned when to guard and when to pass. Guard uses a full turn icon but reduces incoming damage. Pass leaves you wide open but only uses half a turn. If done correctly on certain turns, we can have our party members pass, letting Kirito get 2 actions, which is huge for a run like this. Depending on who the turn starts on, sometimes we can't pull this off and Kirito still only gets 1 action if everyone passes. You can tell if you'll get a second turn by doing some mental math. If the order won't result in Kirito getting a second turn, it's more beneficial to guard instead of passing, so that we can preserve our party members' HP. Keeping them up will allow us to still have the opportunity to get 2 attacks off in future rounds. If a party member goes down, it's not that big of a deal. It does make it so the damage is spread around less and Kirito takes more damage, but with 2 party members instead of 3, I can more consistently act twice as Kirito. It's kind of hard to explain how it works. You have to just see it firsthand and hopefully the footage helps. You'll see me do it a lot this run. There's a rhythm to it, and if you attempt a run like this, you'll see what I mean. This strategy gave us the edge we needed to win the fight against Undead Grease. I take a break from the main storyline to try and grind a bit. I thought the Liga Corridor was the right place to do this. Nah man, it ain't the place. I went in there ready to murk some goblins and they were just like, nope.
Not around here, partner. Not around here.
Don't be like me. Come here after you complete the Grand Cathedral dungeon. I was getting destroyed. And I mean, we're up to about 95 in the amount of deaths we've accumulated so far. And we're not even in the first official dungeon yet. I stopped counting after this. We do end up dying a lot in the Regal Cathedral. I'm suspecting we hit around 150 deaths before I started to turn this run around. When you die in Metaphor, you respawn pretty fast and the game saves often, so you don't have to backtrack as much as you would in Persona 3 Reload, for example. But this also means you can die, just run in and die again and again to the same thing, kind of like in the old Call of Duty days. Which is exactly what I did. And with every death, I became more frustrated and dumber, which is why I've died so much. The reason I was dying at Liga Corridor is because I was challenging every goblin in sight, not realizing that some of them were way above my level. You have this sight you can use to highlight enemies and show their level before attacking them. But like I said, with every death I got dumber and dumber, so I wasn't using it anymore. I died so much that I eventually just memorized which goblins are high level and which ones aren't. Again, I did not need to memorize it because of the sight, but I was just being dumb. Also, if I got caught off guard and the enemy attacked me first, it was an instant death. They wiped my team in one turn regardless of what level they were. This happened to me a lot. There's even some full-on bullshit metaphor like this. I thought I loaded up Metaphor Refantazio, not Dark Souls 2 Scholar of the First Sin. This game's got me confused with the way they place these goddamn enemies. This isn't the only example of this. There's quite a few of these hidden guys scattered throughout dungeons. I defeated about 70 of these goblin guys, so I'm feeling pretty confident that I can take on the boss of this dungeon. But no, he humbled me very quickly. He showed me I'm definitely not supposed to be here. So we turn back home and go to the Grand Cathedral. We get some decent levels, so I'm confident we can make it through this. But we hit our first roadblock, this pack of greyhounds. There really isn't much to say here besides I think I'm too underleveled to deal with these guys. I stand no chance against them. I challenged them 10 plus times without a single win in sight. There's about 5 packs of these greyhounds and I couldn't even defeat a single pack. I saw no other way forward. So I started heading out and I noticed there's a path to get around them on the right. You don't have to fight them. Unbelievable. This is why you don't do blind challenge runs, y'all. Just don't do it. All I've done for the past 5 minutes is show you how much of a bonehead I am. I had some people in the comments tell me I'm as brain dead as MASH in my Mashal video. I am not beating those allegations right now. Past the Hounds was only undead to fight, so we changed to the healer class since they're all weak to light, and push as far as we can until we've used all our MP and MP items. We have to call it a night. I don't want to because we've wasted so many days from just not knowing what to do, but we stock up on items and purify a pair of gauntlets. These gauntlets do more damage to undead enemies, so we swap to the Brawler class to wear the gauntlets. The Brawler class also uses HP instead of MP for our skills, so if we just stock up on healing items, we can pretty much stay in the dungeon indefinitely. Once we have enough Maga, we can swap our 2 party members to the Brawlers. That way we get 20% increased crit rate. Most archetypes have a passive that increases in power if your party members are also equipped with that archetype. So you'll notice we will have our party members all have the same class as Kirito from here on out to increase Kirito's power. We steamroll the dungeon until we hit the Elysian Mage Captain. This fight was awful. They had tons of HP and the sword captains were susceptible to magic, but the mage captain resisted magic, which put me in a bit of a weird spot. I can't effectively do both types of damage at the same time. I can by inheriting skills, but they do less damage. I suspect this is another reason why you can't take out party members from your group this early. It's so that you can diversify and be able to do different types of attacks. Right now, we're also very limited to the archetypes we can use. We swap to mage and take out the 2 sword captains with our magic, and decide to just use items to take down the mage captain. He resisted the items since they were magical attacks, but the items always do a flat amount of damage regardless of resistances. So we were able to defeat him using the items. Looking back, this dungeon was one of the hardest for the run, because we barely had any archetype options and were pretty underleveled for the area. Usually in solo runs, you want to be at higher level than your enemies to be on equal ground. We have not been fighting on equal terms, but we'll change that much later on. We press on until we get to Zorba the Necromancer. It did give us some trouble, mainly because we didn't have a way to heal ourselves. There's a lot of incoming damage this fight since he has 2 undead helping him that also attack. After our first death, we decided to inherit our first skill from the healer archetype so that we can keep our HP up. I paired this with an igniter that gives us Hama. That way we have physical damage, a heal, and magic in case we need it. This gives us a good baseline to have a decent chance against Zorba. After a few attempts, I picked up a technique I like to call formation dancing. Pretty much the way I do it is I start in the front of the formation when I attack with my melee attack to maximize my damage. And then the turn gets passed to me again, I head to the back row and heal. This way I take less damage on the enemy turn. If I'm topped up on health, I can take the risk and stay in the front row and attack for a second time. This is dangerous because the brawler uses HP to attack, and attacking twice leaves me low enough that I can die if I get attacked more than once by the enemy, which happened a few times. Unlike the Persona game, the fight doesn't end when the protagonist goes down, but we have no way to res him, so for us it's an instant reset. Oh, I want to add too, there's a retry button that lets you start from the beginning of the fight whenever you'd like to use it, so you don't have to wait till your party's dead to restart a fight. This, along with a very short death screen, lets you reattempt fights super fast. I love this quality of life change. It makes challenge runs like this where you'll be dying a lot much more bearable. With formation dancing and enough patience, we defeat Zorba. However, there is a follow-up fight with the human. I also use formation dancing to help defeat the human. They do have an attack that inflicts Forget on me. It's up to RNG who gets it, and if it goes to Kirito, I pretty much lose the fight. Forget doesn't let you use your skills, so I can't heal or attack effectively, and I don't have any items that remove Forget. I lose to the human a few times until I get lucky enough RNG. They continuously target Stroll, so he's inflicted with the Forget status effect instead of me, giving me the ability to act freely and eventually defeat the human. I unlock the Gauntlet Runner and make my way to the next city for the story, and on the way, I was surprised with the mini-boss fight, the Monk Captain. I was not prepared whatsoever for this fight and struggled. I was low on healing items and underleveled for the fight. My save locked me into the Gauntlet Runner and I had no way of going back to towns for items or the ability to go back to a dungeon to grind. All I had was the ability to swap archetypes. After a bit of trial and error, I come up with a decent build to complete the fight. A brawler with Medi inherited and a mage fire igniter. The Monk Captain is immune to all damage and can buff and heal his monks. The winning condition is to just defeat the monks. The problem is one resists magic while the other resists physical. I can't do both effectively. There are tons of fights like this and it really shows how the archetype system doesn't allow for as much creativity as the Persona system. There's much more room for creativity later on when you unlock more archetypes. Of course, this is only an issue if you're soloing the game. It's clear Metaphor is intended to be played with a full party, so it really doesn't matter for 90% of the people playing. As far as I know, you aren't able to swap archetypes in battle either. So if you want to do physical damage and magic damage, you need to either inherit a skill or play an archetype like the Seeker. But the Seeker doesn't do as much damage as other classes. When you inherit a magic skill on a class like the Brawler, for example, the damage is very low because damage is mainly based off of weapons in this game. So magic attacks don't scale well with a melee weapon. Nevertheless, we're able to get through the fight. I was able to defeat the first monk with physical attacks. I hit the second monk with my inherited magic skill. It took so long to defeat him since the skill did barely any damage. Just so you can see how low the damage was, it took nearly 190 MP to defeat him with our magic. Each magic attack costs 8 MP. Of course, we used MP to heal, and the monk captain kept buffing the enemy's defense and healing him up too. But it approximately took 16 casts of mage fire to defeat him. I have a few days to prepare for the next big dungeon. The game really stresses quite a few times that I need to be well prepared for the fight in 3 days. It's kind of stressing me out. I've been skating by without grinding. I also really want to start leveling up my archetypes. I've been changing archetypes around so much that I haven't really gotten very far with any of them, which I foresee is going to be bad for us later. So I go back to Beliga Corridor to grind up levels. I picked this location because I need to defeat the boss of the dungeon. I'm still a bit underleveled for it, but I didn't want to waste a day going to the desert and then going to the castle. You can gain a ton of XP by insta-killing enemies in the overworld. You can do this if enemies' levels are significantly lower than yours. This is one of the best ways to farm levels. Shout out to Legendary 7, he has a guide on this and it's where I learned about it. I'll put a link to his channel in the description. He makes a bunch of different kinds of videos. He helped me a ton this run with his guides. He also does a ton of research and testing, so he really knows his stuff. I'm only able to insta-kill the level 9 goblins, which don't give a ton of XP. But once I'm able to insta-kill the higher level goblins, the XP is really going to pick up. I clear out all the goblins that I can insta-kill, then I go to Academia and reset the spawns, then clear out the goblins again. I must have done about 50 of these trips before I was able to start insta-killing the higher tier goblins. The XP was way better after that, but I honestly did about a few hundred trips until I was happy with my level. We hit 25 and maxed out most of our archetypes. The grind was pretty bad. You can get better XP rates in better dungeons, but I wasted so many days that I don't want to go to a different dungeon. Finding out these goblins was actually kind of fun, even if it took forever. It kind of felt like I was playing one of the Sword Art Online games, specifically Hollow Realization. The SAO games are notoriously terrible and grindy, but I really enjoyed some of them. And then having to fight the Minotaur at the end of this dungeon just fit perfectly. Anyways, I go fight the boss and I thought I would roll him with my new levels. He was still a tough fight. Me being level 25 didn't give me an advantage, it just made it to an equal fight. Seriously, this guy does not play. I learned some new archetypes, the Gunner and the Merchant. I have tons of mag, money, and heroes fruit, so I unlock as many archetypes as I can and level the ones I want to use. Then we get our best in slot items from now, as well as stocking up on heals. On the way to the next objective, Catherine attacks us. I get to try the Gunner class for the first time and oh my god, this shit rips. You can do a ton of physical damage with a pretty good chance to crit, while always being in the background, never putting yourself in danger. This class is so good compared to what I had at the Cathedral. I'm only using the Gunner from here on out. Next we encounter a Sandworm human. It stood no chance against the Gunner class. He does swallow us whole, and we have to escape through the do I really have to say this? We have to escape through the anus. This is a time section I really don't do well with time sections, so I just run straight to the end. There's a small boss at the end. I just barely equipped the Gunner class and I already hit a wall with it. The two enemies on the sides are immune to my attacks. I don't have a way to damage them, so I go back to the very beginning. I stay on the Gunner, but inherit an ice magic attack to be able to damage the two minions. Since the end was so close, I take my time to collect all the items around. I really had to have my dodges on point to avoid fighting enemies. I also had to roll through this gross muck. I know I've already compared this game to Dark Souls 2, but I think they definitely took some inspiration in the way they designed some of this game. When we get to the boss, I take out the little guys with Blizz and defeat the main worm with the Gunner abilities. I reach Heizme and he just completely destroys my team. He hits us with a Shadow Clone Jutsu and proceeds to completely bitch us. I got to fight Heizme again. This time I sat there staring at him, waiting to figure out which of the enemies are clones. After 3 minutes of just staring him down, I noticed only one of them has a shadow. That's the real Heizme. I was able to hard target him and then win the fight. After that, I max out the Gunner and take a look at this.
Here's through!
I'm about to have a lot of fun with the Gunner. I use my tremendous power as the Gunner to wipe out an entire tribe of goblins and their Goblin King. Thanks to Hexshot, they were all gone instantly. I can't believe we can get a heavy attack this early on. Finally, things are starting to turn around in our favor. Next, we hit up a dungeon full of mimics. I swapped to the Merchant class since they're super effective against mimics. And I think this might be the new class you run through dungeons with. He uses gold instead of MP. and does almighty damage. Pretty much nothing can resist the attack. Resistances are the issue you're running into when using the gunner or the mage. So if there's a group of enemies with different resistances, that doesn't matter to us anymore. We just slap the merchant archetype on and hit them with the full power of capitalism. After we're done with the mimics, I purify the Investor's Abacus. This weapon is insane. When purified, it doubles the cost of merchant attacks, but also doubles the damage it does. The merchant has an ability that lets us make tons of money by just killing weaker enemies. So there really is no downside to using the Investor's Abacus. We start the next story dungeon and we're hitting damage numbers as high as 885. There isn't anything noteworthy to cover here except for whatever the fuck this is. Don't play this at night. I was horrified. There's sections where you have to stealth past this demon baby and it was not fun. Right before the end of the dungeon, I see 2 Maga crystals that spawn these dogs infinitely and they give some decent XP. I don't know when the next time is that I'll find another opportunity like this to farm XP, so we stay here for about an hour and a half to get ahead on some levels for the next dungeon. We reach the end and get to see what the baby demon looks like. This is just, I don't know, I'm speechless. The baby probably has a few mechanics, but I have no idea what they are because we deleted her so quickly with our Investor's Abacus. She does get healed up once, but it really didn't matter. We were doing so much damage that the fight was over in an instant. Get me the hell out of here. I start to progress some follower bonds and complete requests now that I have the time for it. I was looking around one night to complete a request for Shoal and discovered Gloam Hall. And what a lucky find. I find 2 items that will change everything for this run. With just these 2 items alone, I don't think I'm going to die ever again. The Phantasmal Doll and the Praetorian Cloth. I buy 1 of the doll and 3 of the cloth. The doll lets whoever equips it take 2 turns in a row. This uses turns how it regularly does. It doesn't increase turns or anything like that, but it does increase the amount of times Kirito gets to act. This ensures we'll always get 2 turns as Kirito. We will always be using this item in fights we're forced to bring party members. The cloth changes the cost of guard from 1 turn icon to half a turn icon, making it work the same as a pass. Now we don't have to be strategic about when to pass and when to guard. Our party will always guard from here on out. We get to have the best of both worlds, the low cost of the pass and the damage reduction from guard all in one. With this new setup, Kirito can always act twice and sometimes we can act 3 times. If we hit weaknesses or crits, it can be up to 4 times. After doing some side content, we prepare for our next story dungeon. This time we'll need to infiltrate a gauntlet runner. An infiltration is a bit different from regular dungeon. We don't have to fight our way to the end, instead we're going to sneak in and take out 4 captains. Each captain has a unique mechanic in the way they work, and you can get more details from an informant in the city. We gather information on all of them. It's all a bit complex and hard to remember, but you can review the information they provide in your inventory. We make the necessary preparations and start the infiltration. You start off doing these bird-eye view stealth sections where you knock out guards and clear a path for your party. Then you get to the first fight captain and rinse and repeat. Since we're infiltrating, we don't want to get caught. So any fight we get into, we have to complete it in just 3 turns or an alarm will go off and we fail the mission. I'm pretty nervous about this since our fights tend to drag out this run. I review my notes and go in for the first fight, and calling it a fight feels disingenuous. This was not a fight, it was more of a beatdown. The combination of the Investor's Abacus and our held items that give us more turns, we ran through this fight. The fight was done in just 1 round and a half. The merchant hits hard, but if it weren't for the cloth, I don't think we would have been able to complete these captain fights. Every captain fight goes the same. Their mechanics don't matter to us because the merchant class does almighty damage, which can't be resisted. Their attacks also have a high crit rate. Then there's the fact that we're attacking 2 to 3 times per round. There's even a double captain fight at the end, and we ran through that too. Since we got a 5th party member, we finally unlocked the ability to make changes to our party. We remove everyone and now we can officially be completely solo. We encounter our first solo fight against this octopus monster. He has quite a few tentacles that attack that are hard to manage. They regenerate after a certain time. If we can defeat the arms, we can take less damage, but it's really not worth it since we don't do much damage and the arms just regrow. We try to focus the head, but it doesn't work out. I start messing around with our unlocked archetypes and notice the Samurai class has Thunderblade. This does heavy physical lightning damage to every enemy. This lets us take out all the tentacles and hit the head's weakness. We hit him with a few of those in Formation Dance until he falls. Our next dungeon, the Dragon Temple, has to be the least fun I've had in a dungeon since the Fade section from Dragon Age Origins. Okay, maybe it's not that bad, but it's pretty bad. You have to first traverse this maze with fog. If you go the wrong direction, you get reset. There is a trick to it. If the fog is getting thicker, you're going the wrong way and you'll need to turn around unless you want to get reset. This is easy enough, but essentially it's just trial and error unless I completely miss something. So I spent about 20 minutes just trying each staircase to see if it's the right way. And there's at least 30, maybe 40 staircases you can choose from. The goal is to get to the bottom, but sometimes you have to go up to be able to go back down, and it just stinks. This was awful. When you reach the bottom, there's more maze. It's not that hard to navigate, it's just kind of annoying to get around. But the part that made it insufferable is this fucking ear monster. You have to chase him down and he jukes you every chance he gets. It's impossible to catch him without cutting him off with some doors. It's a small puzzle, but if you fuck up, you might as well start from the beginning. I hate this guy.
You hiding forever, Ricky. When I catch you, Ricky. When I catch you, Ricky.
I finally catch him and I have the worst archetype equipped for this fight and he destroys me. We chase him down again, swap archetypes, and eventually defeat him. All the annoying stuff in this dungeon is made up for though by the final fight. I get to fight a dragon god. It sounds so sick. The actual fight though is not as exciting. He was just a bit of a damage sponge. We do lose to him a few times because he can buff himself up crazy, so we just inherit Dekaja to keep it under control. We found the ideal way to complete this fight was to attack the human on the back. He'll heal up by siphoning from the dragon, but it's better than the alternative. If you focus the dragon, he'll get healed by the human, which he can do as many times as he wants. When the human siphons health from the dragon, he's limited by the dragon's remaining health. After about 20 turns of good timed Dekajas and attacks, we eventually defeat the dragon god. There's a quick follow-up boss, but it's not even worth mentioning. They were defeated in a turn or two. After the dragon dungeon, we take some time to progress our follower bonds to unlock more archetypes. We've been using the merchant and gunner. The merchant is the main archetype we use since it does almighty damage, and the other classes we have right now have a hard time when a fight includes enemies with different resistances. Almighty just damages anyone regardless of their resistances. I am starting to do less damage. I suspect some enemies and bosses in the game have some kind of hidden stat that reduces the amount of almighty damage they take. Since my attacks aren't as effective on certain enemies, so I'll have to diversify a bit in the archetypes I'm using soon. From here on out, I'm not really going to mention any grinds we do. Almost every dungeon has a Magla crystal we can use to farm up, and we do this occasionally to ensure we're up to the same level as our enemies are. After much preparation and discussion, we eventually attempt to assassinate Luis. It doesn't go well and we end up having a 1v1 duel. His attacks are straightforward. He always starts with Soul Cry, which gives him 2 turns, and then he reduces our attack and defense to as low as it can go, and then he spams Royal Splash. He doesn't do anything else. He is a spam god.
I strike! Kill! I strike! Kill! I strike! Kill!
If somehow Luis found his way to our universe and you invited him over to play Smash, he would definitely be a Ness main, just so he could do this. He'll spam Royal Slash 3 times in a row for 3 rounds for a total of 9 attacks straight, and then he'll reapply our debuff. This doesn't give us much of an opening to attack, and there's no place in this fight to be greedy. We unfortunately don't have a way to remove our debuffs, so we tank his hits and heal up each turn until there's an opening to attack. This is either when he debuffs or misses an attack. As long as we're not in danger of dying next turn, we can attack. Easier said than done though. For about every 2,000 damage he does, we're able to attack once for about 300 damage. We also have a passive from the healer skill tree that heals us up a bit each turn that also stacks with an item we have equipped with the same effect. This lets us get more opportunities to attack. It takes a very long time, but with the small openings we get, we're able to defeat him. Nearly using all of our healing items to get through this. After about an hour of cutscenes, we get thrown into an unexpected and difficult fight. Sogne the Icebound, an ancient frost dragon. God, the bosses in this game are so cool. And he destroys us. We were not ready for this, so we reload our save and start looking through the archetypes we've accumulated. This guy is clearly weak to fire. We really only have one decent option for this fight, the Masked Dancer. The base form has a heavy fire attack and they naturally resist ice. I thought this was the way, it definitely wasn't. Rella, the girl you see standing in front of the dragon, buffs and supports the dragon. She's constantly putting up a barrier and nullifies elemental attacks, including our fire attacks. She puts it up every single turn. We could use Makara Break, which you don't have, but even if we did use it, we wouldn't be able to follow up on it since we only have 1 turn. Every single time it's their turn, they put the barrier back up without fail. So we need a new plan. I decided to go with the Cunner class. It's a great choice. They only do physical attacks, so they can bypass the barrier. You really should have no problem this time.
Next track.
So the problem is all the buffs and debuffs. Rella buffs all of the dragon stats to the highest tier and debuffs all of our stats to the lowest tier. We were using Dekunda and Dekaja to nullify this, but it's too costly when it comes to turns. They get 3 turn icons while we get 1. So they can buff, debuff, and attack all in one turn. Removing all the buffs or debuffs is pointless since they can just put both back up on their turn. And on top of that, we need to heal. We never get the opportunity to attack. I found the perfect solution though. The sniper class has a heavy attack that lowers defense. This is the best we can hope for to solve our problem. We also inherit a skill that heals us passively each turn, giving us more room to attack. While the defense debuff doesn't do much, Rella will always waste a turn icon to remove the debuff, evening out the battlefield a bit. We get to debuff and attack with 1 turn icon and always use up one of their turns. This is a really slow process. We use all of our MP twice over to defeat the dragon. Regardless, we conquer the dragon and move on to our next challenge. We're getting a rematch with Luis. We're given a week to prep. We visit an informant that gives us a look into Luis's fighting style. On top of his previous mechanics, he also has a way to identify weaknesses and will always target it. He can use the 4 elements: fire, ice, wind, and thunder. Sound familiar? God, the clairvoyant relic. So that means we need to go in with an archetype that doesn't have one of those weaknesses. Right now, all of our archetypes include one of those weaknesses. The only one that doesn't is the gunner tree, but they have one downside. They're weak to slash, which is Luis's main attack. So to get around this, we wear an item that resists slash, and now we don't have a weakness Luis can target. We don't want to repeat of last time, where we were always low on HP. So we put on Regenerate 3 to give us passive healing each turn, along with Sturdy Stance, which lowers the damage we take by half, but makes us unable to dodge. Honestly, dodge rarely ever triggers for me in this game, so I think the trade is worth it. We also inherit Third Eye. Whenever an enemy attacks us, their hit rate is cut in half. We'll almost never get hit with crits. We don't take Dekaja or Dekunda because we have items that can produce the same effect. We also have Makara and Tetra Break items just in case too. The fight starts and it's exactly the same as last time. He gives himself 2 turn icons and spams his slash attack. He isn't identifying our weakness, likely because we don't have one he can exploit. So he's constantly attacking. He's hitting us for like 1/8 of his usual damage. The resist slash cuts his attack damage in half. Sturdy Stance cuts the damage we take by half again, and on top of that, we're in the back row so we take even less damage. We almost never have to heal up since our passive recovers the damage we took that turn. He eventually decides that instead of attacking 3 times, that he's going to attack 5 times in a row. Very nice. But with all our damage reduction, even the spam god himself couldn't take us down, and we eventually come out on top. After a ton of exposition, I've finally reached the end game. There's some regular dungeons like you'd expect, as well as bounties and side quests. All of these are pretty standard, we have no problem with it. But before a final fight with Luis, we have 30 days to prepare. There are these things called the Trials of the Dragons. This is some of the most difficult content in the game, that each come with their own flavor of bullshit. I don't know much about the trials, except that I've heard people talk about super bosses. I'm guessing it's the dragons, which is not very comforting. The game recommends we take on these trials to be ready to fight Luis. It also advises us that our companions are absolutely crucial for overcoming these trials. So it's not looking good. We're going to attempt the trials either way. We start off with the Devourer of Nations. I chose the sniper archetype to scout out the fight, but I didn't last more than 2 turns. I changed my loadout so that I can resist fire and slash attacks. This will let me resist some of their attacks. After their attempt, I also learned that he inflicts some status ailments. He can paralyze, burn, and freeze me all at the same time. The paralysis is hard to get yourself out of. Paralysis usually means I can't attack or heal, and I just die. So I decide to inherit instant recovery. This lets me overcome status ailments in 1 turn. My equipment gives me some passive healing each turn as well. With this setup, I'm able to attack almost every turn, unless the dragon uses his tail attack or ice attack. In that case, we're forced to heal. The dragon also buffs himself, but each time I attack with the sniper class, I lower their defense. This was the perfect setup to defeat them and to move on to the next dragon, the Devourer of Stars. This dragon gave me the most trouble. My first attempt goes terrible. I tried every element in attack, but he repels every single one of them. It looks like he's immune to every type of attack. I'll have to use Almighty damage. I have a few options for Almighty damage, but I decided on the Tycoon for now, since they have the best equipment. I have mostly the same inherited skills as the sniper class, and I'm using the same accessories. The Devourer of Stars can fully debuff all of my stats, and can fully buff himself. He can also poison and inflict Hex on you. Hex insta-kills you if you have it for more than 1 turn, so instant recovery is extremely important here. For some reason, if I get inflicted with poison and Hex at the same time, sometimes the Hex doesn't get cleansed and I die. I'm not sure how this works, but it was a bit frustrating, especially when I was getting so close to the end. I missed so many of my attacks because of the buffs and debuffs, and I only get 1 action while the dragon gets 5. Removing the buffs and debuffs is pointless, since they'll use 2 of their actions to reapply them, and then they'll attack with the other 3 turns. I would make no progress in this fight. I try using Heat Riser for myself, but it results in the same problem. I tried a number of things like using Dekaja or Dekunda just at the right times, but no matter what I did, it ended the same. I couldn't even get close to defeating him. I got around the buff problem in the Luis fight and previous dragons by using the Sniper class, who debuffs while they attack, letting us make progress through the fights. But this dragon is immune to everything but Almighty, so it's not an option. I also noticed I was having to heal all the time, and then I realized this spot cuts your HP down to a flat 300 at the beginning of the fight, and it stays like this until you defeat them. For comparison, I usually have 750 HP. There is no way around this. You can't increase your health, it's always a flat 300. The Tycoon class really isn't working. I try using the Prince, but to be effective, I have to be in the front row, and I just take too much damage. It can kill me in 1 turn, even if I'm at full HP, which isn't very much to begin with. I also have other classes that can use almighty damage, like the Devil Summoner or the Warlord in general. No class with any combination of equipment or inherited skills led to a victory. Believe me, I tried almost every possibility. So what's the real problem here? First off, I'm a dweeb. I came on a day with bad weather, which means if I crit, I don't get a second action. The Tycoon is a crit machine and we can't take advantage of that. Aside from the other things listed, I'm having a hard time managing HP. For the previous bosses, resisting slash as well as a sturdy stance passive led to them doing barely any damage. This dragon has a ton of attacks we can't resist. He has 4 possible attacks, and the ones he attacks with are random. He has Loathsome Claw, Poison Tail, Toxic Breath, and Poison Toxic Claw. The only attack I can resist is Poison Toxic Claw, which is slash damage. Even if I could somehow set up in a way that lets me resist all of their attacks, they'll just spam Loathsome Claw, which is their hardest hitting move, and it does almighty damage. How do I know this? I used the Prince archetype who resists all damage, and all they did was spam Loathsome Claw. So, to keep it simple, if they only attack with Poison Toxic Claw, I can resist the attacks, and then I don't lose much HP and I have an opportunity to attack myself. If I get hit with any combination of the other 3 attacks, it forces me to heal instead of being able to attack. The average amount of damage the other 3 attacks do is 45. There is a possibility that they'll attack us 2 to 5 times in a turn, and if they attack 5 times, we'll take about 225 damage. That's over a third of our health. This doesn't account for crit since I have a passive that doesn't let me be crit. So what I'm trying to say is, the opportunities for me to attack is entirely up to RNG, just depending on how many times they decide to attack me. If I'm below 225 HP, attacking is a gamble because I can just die the following turn. I do take this risk many times and it works out, but as the battle goes on, the likelihood of them attacking me 5 times in a row increases. It seems like anytime they're below 40% of their HP, they attack 5 times in a row. They could be programmed to be more aggressive, or they could just be programmed to go for a kill if they see it, kind of like the AI in Pokemon Radical Red. Besides all this, when I get lucky enough to be able to attack, I miss very often because my accuracy is usually fully debuffed and their evasion is fully buffed. When I say fully, I mean by all 3 stages. Needless to say, this made for a really frustrating day and made me feel like this battle was impossible. I'm sure there's a cheese or an easy way to get around this I don't know about, but I want to figure this out on my own. After 4 hours and a disgusting amount of attempts, I decide to leave and come back another day. I progress as many follower bonds as I can to see if I have more options. I end up getting the item I think will change everything. In Neurus's follower bond, you get the Fortune God Abacus. This triples the cost of Tycoon skills, but triples their damage. We also unlocked a few passives. The most important ones are Unyielding Blood and Battle Master. Battle Master makes us completely immune to physical ailments, which include poison and hex. This solves the weird issue we were having with instant recovery. Unyielding Blood revives an ally with full HP if they go down in a fight. I was confused about this. I thought it only worked on others the way it was worded, but no, it works on you even if you're solo. I go back to attempt the dragon and he takes an instant 5,000 damage. Apparently, maxing out Katharina's bomb lets her just come to random dungeons and bully bosses. With the Fortune God's Abacus, we do so much more damage. We were hitting 300 to 500 damage earlier, and now we're hitting for 1,500. The weather is also good today, so I can follow up on a crit with a second attack or a heal, which is massive for this fight. We can do up to 3,000 damage in 1 turn, 10x we were doing earlier. Also, when you max Gallica's bond, she has a chance to randomly give us 3 additional turns, which triggers during this fight too. I get him low so quickly, but I've hit the point where he has fully debuffed us, and I start missing a lot of my attacks. We just need to land 2 more attacks. We take the ending really slow and don't get greedy, but eventually I find some openings and officially defeat the Devourer of Stars. Hell yeah. The third dragon was a bit of a joke. He did cook me the first 2 times while I was learning his mechanics. He has a move that does 9,999 damage. It's an insta kill, and he has a charm attack that pretty much means death for solo players. But just like Duke Horacio taught me while completing Dragon Slayer 1 for the first time, never fight a dragon without an anti-dragon shield. Well, in this case, it's a piece of armor that nullifies fire, and a passive that makes us unable to be charmed. We pretty much sit there, immune to his attacks, and defeat him. I thought that was the last dragon, but there's actually one more. And he's not really a dragon. Maybe he's a metaphorical dragon? He's like a dragon? Well, we're fighting ourselves, but they are much better than us. He's everything I want it to be. The Elegy of the Soul goes through every single archetype in the game and uses their attacks. I would have loved to have a way to swap archetypes like that mid-battle. That wasn't the Masked Dancer. He gets 5 turns in his first phase. His attacks hurt quite a bit, and like the other bosses, he can fully buff and debuff. He can fully buff himself and debuff me. Fortunately, it takes him a few turns to do both. He doesn't usually do it all at once. He also has some insta-kill moves. I had no idea how these worked. I got insta-killed late into the fight so many times. He can use Armageddon. Yeah, Armageddon. You know the attack I used to cheese the Reaper in my Persona 3 runs? That can kill anything? Yeah, that. I really couldn't figure out how to get around it, so I looked it up. If you have any of the rewards from the other dragons equipped, he'll use it. So you can't wear any pieces of the dragon armor. So we unequip all of it and go back. On our next attempt, we learn some more of his bullshit mechanics. He has the ability to make you weak to any element, and then he follows up on the element, giving him an insane amount of actions. Then he uses Armageddon on me again. I thought maybe my party members had something equipped, but they didn't. I thought it was maybe just a weird bug and went in for another attempt. I continued through the fight normally and phased him. Once he gets low enough, he'll start with his standard 5 turn icons. He'll use 2 of them and then give himself 4 more turn icons for a total of 9 turn icons. Yes, 9 turns. He also starts to get really aggressive. He uses all of his moves that give you weaknesses. So you become weak to every element, and then he'll follow up on each element. This lets him use half turn icons a ton. So sometimes he'll use his first line actions to make you weak and attack, and then the next turn he can act 16 to 18 times. I wish I was joking. He really does act this many times. I was so caught off guard by this. I was just sitting there like, what the f is happening right now? It was so upsetting at first, and eventually I just had to laugh about it. And then when it was finally my turn, I get to act once, and if I'm lucky, a second time. And then I sit here for another 3 minutes watching this guy use every fucking move he knows before I can attack again. If you ever played Yu-Gi-Oh against someone with one of those fishing decks where they just fish for like the cards they need, a good example of these are some of the Blue Eyes decks. This is exactly what that was like. Just sitting there watching someone draw 30 cards in one turn and then destroy you the next.
Draw 3. I summon Pot of Greed to draw 3 additional cards from my deck. And I summon Pot of Greed to draw 3 additional cards from my deck. Then I play Magic Force, which allows me to play Pot of Greed once again to draw 3 additional cards from my deck.
Needless to say, we had to be really patient. We spent most of our turns healing or removing buffs. Usually 4 turns would go by before I can finally attack. I also forgot to mention they use Concentrate as much as they'd like. In this game, they rebalanced Concentrate to only be usable once per battle, but this doesn't apply to the Elegy of the Soul. He can use it as many times as he'd like. We play really patiently and get them close to death, but they use Armageddon on us again. There's no reason they should be using Armageddon if I don't have any dragon items equipped. My party members don't either. I looked everywhere for an answer. I did find some obscure posts on Steam discussion boards with people having the same issue. My theory was maybe the Armageddon triggers after being in the fight too long, because my fights with them were 30 plus minutes. And the Armageddon kept happening super late into the fight and not at the beginning like the other dragon's insta-kill moves. Someone in the forums mentioned that if you or any party member have an item equipped that nullifies an element, you are susceptible to the Armageddon attack, even if the item is not a dragon item. Apparently the first dragon had this mechanic too. Some people guessed maybe it came over somehow from that fight, so I just put all my party members in trash gear with no effects, and that seemed to fix the issue. Keep in mind, I was doing this run on the first few days of release, so there were a few bugs like this one and not much information on them still. Anyways, he can still act a bajillion times, but after 8 attempts or so, I mastered a rotation for this. If I'm low enough, I heal. I attack when I can and only remove his buffs when he's fully buffed, not a second sooner, then repeat. It was really slow, but without the Armageddon, I defeated the final dragon. This was by far the hardest fight just because of all the actions they can get. But with the Elegy of the Soul conquered, record, I feel super confident that I can defeat Luis. With that done, there's no more content until the final dungeon. So I max out all bonds and requests, and I eventually have some time left over so I complete all the Coliseum challenges. This gave me an absolutely broken item, and I'm so happy I decided to go back and complete it. It gave me the Gambler's Manual, an accessory that doubles crit damage. It doubles it. Normally this isn't super busted since crits can be rare, but with the build I made, it's borderline unfair for the enemy. I'll have to replace my accessory that resists slash, but I doubt Luis will be doing slash damage anymore. Before I can take down Luis, I'll have to complete the final dungeon, the Skybound Avatar. This dungeon is pretty bad. The enemies aren't difficult, there's just a bunch of mazes that feel like they are just put there to waste your time. The mazes aren't difficult, they just slow you down. I mean that figuratively, but they also literally slow you down. There's mud everywhere that forces you to move very slow. They also brought back the worst enemy in the game, the ear guys. The ear guys that move when you move and juke you. After you get past the maze, there's another maze. It's just like the maze in the Dragon God dungeon, but worse. You have to guess what door goes where. They teleport you to a random location. The screen also goes completely white when you teleport, making it more disorienting. Unlike the Dragon God dungeon, there isn't any fog or similar mechanic that indicates where the right door is to move forward. You just have to remember where you've been and what door goes where. And for someone like me with awful memory, this was a nightmare. After the god-awful final dungeon design, we fight Zorba once more. This is the time I can go over my build and how stupid it is. My Tycoon has the Fortune God's Abacus that triples our damage, and a passive that doubles crit rate, so we almost always crit, along with 99 strength and 99 luck. Then we have the Gambler's Manual that doubles our crit damage, and I mean, just look. I hit him so hard I had to take a moment to realize what the fuck just happened. This combination is just insane. After Zorba, we can now finally take on Luis, the man we've been aiming to take down the entire game. This is our third and final rematch with him. He decides to turn himself into God, but if you played other Atlas games, you know what we do to gods. I wish I could tell you his mechanics for his first phase, but it was over so quick, I have no clue what he does in this fight. His second phase was more challenging. He has a ton more HP and does more damage. He has 3 masks that can each devour a puppet sacrifice. If a mask devours a sacrifice, it triggers something really bad, like every mask healing up or him going on an attack frenzy and doing tons of damage. You can destroy the sacrifices before he eats them, but we only get one shot at it. We only do enough damage to destroy the sacrifice if we crit. If we don't crit, he eats the sacrifice and we're in for a bad time. His stats are significantly higher than the other bosses because I don't crit as often now. He puts a sacrifice in his mouth each turn. If I successfully destroy it, I just hard target one mask at a time until they're all destroyed. If I don't successfully destroy it, I just have to heal. After all the masks are destroyed, it will trigger his final phase. The final phase isn't a problem until you get them low enough. He'll start with 5 actions, then use Soul Scream to give himself 4 more actions for a total of 9 actions each turn. With his onslaught of attacks, every single turn he'll get us down to below 100 HP. He'll also fully buff himself and fully debuff me, and then also apply Daze, all in one turn. Daze greatly decreases my hit rate. When it's finally my turn, I have no choice but to heal and wait for a window to attack. Except there never is one. I am always left with barely any HP at the end of their turn. I just need to land one more hit and they're dead. I try to rely on unyielding blood to go for an attack and just tank his hits, but the attack always misses. I can't attack him whatsoever. My hit rate is way too low and his evasion is so high that none of my attacks ever land. Like the other bosses, removing buffs and debuffs are pointless since they have so many actions they'll just put it back up and attack. We wiped to this fight a few times and are hard stuck. Every attempt ends in failure and I have no answers. The worst part about this is that I have to complete phase 2 again for every attempt. I try everything I can, but he just overpowers me with his attacks and buffs every time. I thought this was it. I sat in academia trying to cook up anything that'll work. And after a long time, I came to the conclusion that I have one hope and one hope only. Gallica. Gallica has a chance to give me 4 turns randomly. What's the chance of this triggering? I have no fucking clue, but it's low. So the plan is to get him low to his final phase, and instead of trying to attack and remove buffs, we'll just heal and stall every single turn until Gallica comes through. It took damn near forever, but eventually we get our 4 turns. We remove all buffs and debuffs and then attack twice to finally defeat Luis. Holy shit, this one was fun and I hope you enjoyed watching it. I recommend this run to anyone who likes getting cheese and enjoys Yu-Gi-Oh battles that last more than 6 hours, because that's what you're in for. You're gonna sit here and watch the enemy attack 15 times before you get your turn. Seriously, Seriously though, thanks for watching. I make cool shit around RPG and strategy games on this channel. If you're into that, consider subscribing, and I hope to see you next time.
This time, baby, no, it won't happen again. 'Cause I know that you probably